Well, US President Donald Trump has urged Russia's Vladimir Putin to spare Ukrainian troops being pushed back out of Russia's Kursk region. The plea comes after a lengthy meeting held overnight between US envoy Steve Witkoff and President Putin in Moscow, where the pair discussed bringing an end to the war in Ukraine.
Let's get the latest on this with our America's editor, John Lyons, who's been following developments very closely. John joins us now from Washington. So, John, yes, various demands being canvassed publicly. Where do we sense that these negotiations are up to?
Well, Greg, for the first time, we've now there's actual dialogue going on now. Donald Trump had said that, he wanted those Ukrainian soldiers who look like they've been encircled. These are the Ukrainians took over part of Russia, Kursk, and now the Russians are making a big push on Kursk with both their own Russian forces and reportedly North Korean forces who've come in. They're trying to expel the Ukrainian army from that region of Russia before any sort of sit-down negotiations begin. Now, Donald Trump has said that he thinks there possibly could be a horrible massacre coming up, and he's urged Vladimir Putin to do whatever he can to spare the lives of those Ukrainian soldiers. Now, Vladimir Putin in turn has responded to that and said quite recently, a short time ago, that sure, they can be spared as long as they essentially put down their weapons and surrender. So he's calling for a surrender before they begin a ceasefire talk. So amid all of this, what's really interesting is that there is now this almost daily dialogue between the Ukrainians and the Russians via the US president. So this surely looks like it may be a positive sign. Now, we don't know where this will end because who knows inside the mind of Vladimir Putin or even Volodymyr Zelensky or Donald Trump for that matter. But this is definitely a change in the dynamic.
Well, indeed. And you've talked about President Putin's demands. What about security guarantees, which Ukraine has been very vocal about pressing on Donald Trump and his administration in particular? Do we have a clearer understanding of what's been agreed between Kyiv and Washington?
Well, for the last couple of weeks, Greg, the Americans have been saying we cannot give a security guarantee. That's why the British and the French have been saying we are prepared to put in troops into Ukraine to try to help enforce any peace that comes from a ceasefire. The Americans have had a de facto security guarantee. They're saying that if we take over some of the rare earths and minerals of Ukraine, in payment for the money we've already spent defending Ukraine, then of course we will want to protect our own assets. That's very much the Donald Trump view of how foreign policy and security guarantees should work. But interestingly, for the first time, he has now said that we will make sure that should there be a ceasefire, that the Russians are not able to then just keep fighting. He said, we'll make sure of that. Now, we don't know what that means. Like a lot of Donald Trump's expressions, they're quite opaque. But clearly now the Ukrainians' number one concern is that what's the point of doing a ceasefire with Russians, because in the past they've never shown good faith in adhering to that. It looks like the Americans are now starting to move a bit more towards Ukraine's position.
All right, not just the Americans either, is it, John? Because we are aware, and you've alluded to the formation or mobilisation of some sort of ill-defined coalition of the willing that will also involve some discussions with Anthony Albanese our time. Do you sense there from Washington that the Trump administration is supportive of this, will acquiesce with some other coalition that could go in to maintain a peace should we get there?
Well, yes, Greg. The Americans are making it absolutely clear under Donald Trump that we will not play this role. But I think increasingly they're almost sort of subcontracting it to others. They keep saying, Donald Trump keeps saying that, look, if others want to do it, the British, the French, and now presumably the Australians as well, according to Anthony Albanese, if the coalition, so-called, wants to get in there and act as peacekeepers, they can do it. Our major concern will be protecting our investments. Now, it's a real shift in US foreign policy here. It's very much under Donald Trump what's in our financial interests. We're seeing that in their trade war with Canada, with Mexico, with the Europeans. And so the new foreign policy of the United States is now very much transactionally based on commercial interests. But I think the Americans would be more than happy to allow and support any coalition, including the Australian government sending troops.